I was just checking. This is a really big case, a very critical point, and it comes this really broader debate on corporate governance in Korea. Would we be seeing some change here out of this case?
Well, I think the challenge here for companies in Korea, these big chaebol, is that by regulatory structure, historical legacy, they have grown up as independent companies with cross-shareholdings that knit them together in very complex ways. And shareholders are there sort of by necessity, but not necessarily respected for value creation. The challenge for Samsung is to make this generational transition whilst the founding family really only owns very small percentages of the various entities.
Yeah, they talk about this, so once-in-a-lifetime generational leadership transition coming out of Samsung right now, and shareholders will vote about 3 weeks. But, what's different from previous contests in Korea is that I think it seems like outsiders now are getting more local support. Do you think public awareness has changed in Korea?
Yes, I think, I've been watching this closely for over 15 years. It's been a slow evolution. We had a similar evolution in the United States from the late 70s through the present day, but particularly in the 1980s and 1990s when shareholder activists drove a lot of change in the way that corporations were run. We're seeing that happening in Korea, but in a more halting fashion, and part of it is actually a function of the regulatory environment. A lot of these decisions to merge companies are governed by codes that require certain protocols to be observed that don't necessarily reflect economic reality, and that's certainly the case here. The acquiree company has a market value that is somewhat less than the underlying net assets of the company, but the acquirer, which was only listed as an IPO about 6 or 7 months ago, has a market cap that is almost 4 times its underlying net asset value. And the code requires the ratio of shares when you're making a merger like this to actually respect the market cap rather than the underlying net asset value of the entities, and it's not typically subject to the discretion of the acquirer and the acquiree. It's actually governed by these regulations. So Samsung can get a great deal out of this through Cheil Industries if they're successful in persuading shareholders to participate. But unfortunately, at the same time, the shareholders in Samsung Construction are exposed to potentially significant loss. My own calculation says, the downside at the current ratio is that they would lose about $4 billion in equivalent, whereas if the ratio reflected the underlying net asset value, according to the accountants, the shareholders of Samsung C&T would actually gain about $4 billion. So there's $8 billion of value at stake here in terms of who's going to benefit from that.
Yeah, the stakes are definitely very high. James, if Samsung wins in this case, though, I mean, this fight really has threatened to erode investor confidence in South Korea, as one domestic lawmaker has said. Do you agree? And and would this spark foreign investors to leave Korea?
No, I don't think this will drive foreign investors to leave Korea, but it may drive a change in this regulation, which obviously was well intentioned, but is proving to be dysfunctional. Today we have a court hearing on the matter where Elliott is looking to try and set things right in a legal context. But I don't see that there's very many degrees of freedom for either Elliott or Samsung or the court to change this structure. It really will come down to the shareholders in their vote in a few weeks' time. And this is very interesting because historically there's tended to be a sort of, local emotion to support the hometown boys. But this time, partly because the stakes are so big and partly because Korea has gradually learned that, pragmatism about these numbers is important, with people like the National Pension Fund holding big stakes in these entities. It will be very interesting to see whether the shareholders actually vote rationally in an economic sense or emotionally in a sort of nationalistic sense because of the foreign interloper.
Where do you think he'll go, James, real quickly?
The odds look, at the moment the odds look actually in favor of pragmatism, but we have to see how that plays out over the next few weeks. And politically, I don't mean in a national sense, but I mean in terms of how the National Pension Fund will vote, it sounds like they actually are trying to distance themselves from the decision by outsourcing it, which may bring rationality into the game.